This is Jerry Gordon, senior editor at the New English Review, and with me is John Adams, former Brigadier General in the U.S. Army, military strategist of note, and a Jew by choice, which makes him unique in many ways. This presentation is special. It's to provide the congregation of Parkview Baptist Church in Pensacola at a meeting on Monday, April 8th, with some background and awareness of what is currently going on with the war that Israel is facing, a civilizational war that Israel is facing, and frankly, the Jewish people are in Gaza, against an extremist Muslim Brotherhood group known as Hamas. General, as is our normal pattern, would you provide a blessing for both Israel and the Israeli Defense Force?
Yes, absolutely, Jerry. It's a privilege to join you on this Zoom meeting. Allow me to ask God for his blessing on the Israeli Defense Force and the state of Israel and the people of Israel as they confront civilizational enemy, Hamas, and Iran. We shouldn't forget that. But let's please ask God to bless them at this terrible time where they have gone through so much and they're fighting for their survival and for all of us. Please, God bless them as they fight for all of us.
Baruch Hashem. What was the toll of the Hamas barbarous attack on October 7th, 2023, that Israel suffered?
There are at least two ways to address that question. One is the numerical way. I'll start with that. The second is the overall effect of what October 7th meant for Israel and for us as Israel's best ally in the world. On October 7th, the Hamas barbarians killed 780 civilians, 314 IDF soldiers, and 62 first responders. They slaughtered them. They left them for dead after having conducted the most unimaginable depredations for a total of nearly 2,000, 1,156, and some of them have died since. Since October 7th, in Gaza, there have been 256 Israel Defense Forces soldiers killed in Gaza. There have also been, although it's not in Gaza, it's part of this conflict, 11 IDF soldiers killed along the northern border of Israel with Lebanon. And there have been 9 civilians killed along the northern border with Lebanon. So a result of what happened, the war that was started by Hamas on October 7th continues to cause death and casualties, both for civilians and military in Israel. We should mention, and it's not unimportant, that there have been a number of Gazan civilians killed in the war. But I want to emphasize before I mention these numbers that all of the numbers for the Gazan civilians come from the Gazan Ministry of Health, which is part of the Gaza Hamas government. So the credibility of these numbers is suspect from the beginning. But according to the Gazan Health Ministry, again, an arm of the Hamas government, 33,000 Gazan civilians have been killed. The Palestinian government in Judea and Samaria, which is often called the West Bank, has also seen 456 deaths since October 7th. And there have been, according to calculations of both Israel and the Lebanese government, 343 deaths of the Lebanese people in Lebanon. and 280, approximately 280 Hezbollah militants have been killed. So that's the numerical answer to your pertinent question. But the other answer is what has been the effect of October 7th, and we can't overlook that. It absolutely traumatized the people of Israel. There's very few people in Israel who don't know someone who was killed, someone who was slaughtered on October 7th, or an IDF soldier that was killed either on October 7th or since then. And I know that because I know you, Jerry, have many friends in Israel. I have many too. And my friends in Israel are, whatever policy they support, they tell me that this has been an absolutely traumatic experience for the entire country. People know people who were killed. They have relatives who are still fighting. They know how terrible this was, not just for the people who were killed, but for everyone who knows somebody who died in this conflict, and everyone who suffers because of the war that Hamas declared on Israel on October 7th.
How many hostages were taken by the Hamas force that invaded Israel?
There were 243 hostages taken on October 7th, and 103 or so have been released. We don't know how many are still alive. We continue to find out from other evidence, both early on after the invasion, the Hamas invasion, but also since then, that many of the hostages who were killed, or hostages who were taken were killed. And many of them were killed very soon after they were taken hostage. So that's the story of the numbers, but the numbers must be combined with the effect. Very many people in Israel know hostages who were taken. Now, I have to mention also, there's a large number of people, I'd say the vast majority of Israelis fight, pray, and want to see all the hostages released. Regardless of situation, they would like to see them come home. But there are also hostage families who have politicized this and have joined the protesters who were in the streets before October 7th. And they by politicizing this, they really obscure and make more difficult the process of returning the hostages, because they're not asking for the hostages just to be returned. They don't want to fight Hamas, and that will be a problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed and solved.
How comparable was this attack to something that most Americans are of a certain age are familiar with? That's the Al Qaeda attack on September 11th, 2001. How does
Well,
that compare with the Holocaust in World War II?
well, I can, I will deign to provide a comparison between our 9/11 and October 7th. And I think I'm in an unfortunate position of being able to do that, because I was in the Pentagon on 9/11 and my office was destroyed. So I know from a personal standpoint how bad it was. However, as bad as it was, and I don't minimize 9/11 for anybody in our country, in terms of proportional to the numbers, the 3,000 or so who died at 9/11 here are 15 times less than the number of Israelis who were slaughtered on October 7th. 1,200 people. And Israel is a small country, only 9 million people. We're bigger now than we were then, but we were still, 280 million people. And you compare that 3,280 million, again, the raw numbers, 15 times less proportionally to what Israel suffered. And I would argue also, I still remember 9/11. It's seared in my memory, and I know people who died in 9/11, and many of us do. And I'm not taking anything away from the traumatic experience that many of us suffered on 9/11. But I don't really think it's a very good comparison between 9/11 and October 7th. October 7th was that much more searing for Israel, for the people. And the other thing is, we were able to address those who did 9/11, and it took us some time to get Al Qaeda roped in, but we did. And Israel's still fighting the battle. It's on their border. They have to deal with these people, these terrorists, every single day. So the wounds are not they're still open and raw, and soldiers are still dying. And so it has that much more of an effect in Israel. To reference the Holocaust, and I know I wouldn't want to minimize the relationship between the Holocaust. It was terrible for Israel to go through October 7th, but I don't know how to compare anything to the Holocaust. I don't know how it can be done. The Holocaust was so much more searing and destructive and traumatic, and destroyed so much of our world. The whole world was affected by the Holocaust, and of course the Jewish people were at the center of it because they were the ones who suffered the most. But not making light of anybody else's experience, I don't know how you can compare anything to the Holocaust. I really don't.
As an aside, I witnessed 9/11 in New York directly, lost friends there, and later interviewed a number of people, including the father of one of the more heroic victims who participated in the Flight 93 attack on the conspirators who was trying to steal that aircraft and dash it into the U.S. Capitol. What is Hamas, and what is its extremist agenda in fighting multiple wars with Israel, given the group's 1988 charter? And why is that charter significant?
Well, it's the founding document of Hamas, and in the charter, they dedicate themselves to the destruction of Israel and to the destruction of the Jewish people. So it's not we, for example, I think are used to thinking of a declaration of war as one state against another. This is not like that. This is a dedication to murder, destruction of people. There's no, and they don't have any. They since that time have continued to dedicate themselves. The most recent was just after October 7th, when Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, said, "We'll never stop killing Jews. We'll do it 7 times more." There's no sense of any remediation at all. They're dedicated to killing Israelis and destroying Israel and killing Jews. That's what they do. So all the wars come from the same motivation: terrorism, destruction, and murder.
We've used the term civilizational war. That's a polysyllabic term. Why don't you define why that's significant in terms of what the current combat is like in Gaza?
I do believe this is a civilizational war. I think Israel is fighting on our behalf. We share a common civilization. We have faith in God. God is who we listen to, and who our ethics and morality are based on obedience to God. And we are inspired by the same God. Israel is on the side of justice and truth, and on the side of goodness and mercy. That's what their understanding is. It's a very biblical understanding. And I think that for the very large part, that's shared with the United States and with Western civilization. Hamas comes from a different civilization. They do not share the same understanding of what God wants them to do. They believe God wants them to destroy the infidels and they will never give up until they've done that. It's their commandment is to destroy infidels. Our commandment is to, among other things, I think we share this very, very largely with Israel. Christianity teaches us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So does Judaism. Christianity teaches love and mercy and justice. And so does Judaism. I'm not saying there are no differences between the two religions, but they're very similar in their dedication to ethics, morality, and to treating other people as you would have them treat you. It is a civilizational war. It's between the forces of evil, which is represented by Hamas, and by Iran, which sponsors and funds Hamas, and the forces of, in this case, the state of Israel, but also Western civilization, which we share with them. So it is a civilizational war. And make no mistake, if Hamas destroys Israel, which we must do everything we can do to prevent that from even being a possibility, Hamas destroys Israel, the United States is next.
What outside Islamic extremist groups support Hamas in its current war with Israel?
Well, the most important support for Hamas in its war against Israel is Iran. Iran has trained Hamas. They've given them equipment. They pay them. They provide diplomatic and military support across the board. So Iran is really behind all of this. But there are a number of other groups that Iran works closely with. I mean, in the case of Hezbollah, which is really part of the government of Lebanon, in the case of Hezbollah, it's subordinate to Iran. It's not a proxy. It's subordinate to Iran. They do what Iran tells them to do, and they obey orders. In the case of the Iranian Republican Guard Corps, which is all over the region, you may hear of the IRGC. They're part of the state of Iran. They're the most radical part. They're the part that sponsors terrorism directly, and we just saw last week an attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, which killed a couple of major IRGC figures. So they're part of this too. They're directly subordinate to Iran. Hamas is a proxy. Make no mistake, they're directed by Iran, but they're not directly subordinate to Iran. They're their own group. They have their own policymakers. Interestingly enough, their policymakers were trained by IRGC. And then there's the Houthis. We see them operating out of Yemen, mostly in West Yemen, close to the Red Sea, and they've been conducting their depredations against shipping in the Red Sea and through the Bab el-Mandab, which is the gateway from the Gulf of Aden to the Red Sea. And they've conducted lots of operations to disrupt not only shipping, but world trade. So, and we can find other smaller groups, but those are the main ones that Iran is either directly responsible for, or they provide sponsorship for.
There also is something called Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, which has been engaged in more than 150 attacks on U.S. bases in both Syria and in Iraq. And it is considered, not unlike Hezbollah in Lebanon, a direct arm of Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
It's an evil group of people with many arms and tentacles, all of which lead back to Iran.
Why are pro-Palestinian groups in the U.S. and global media calling for an immediate ceasefire when Israel has not defeated Hamas in Gaza, nor has it considered releasing the Israeli hostages?
I think there's of course there's those who who, believe it or not, actually support Americans that actually support Hamas, and we know that they exist because they say they do. And they are among those who are the most violent protesters in our streets. They support Hamas. And if they support Hamas, they're going to call for a ceasefire because Hamas is being steadily destroyed by the Israel Defense Forces in Gaza. But there's others who support a ceasefire who may say, well, we actually support Israel, but we don't think that they're doing the right thing by conducting this combat, and we want to stop the war. Despite the fact that would mean Hamas would survive and come back again, perhaps as soon as, well, they're going to come back immediately. We already see that happening, even in Gaza itself. But there's at least two kinds of people who say they want to cease fire, but they support Israel. They want Israel to defend itself. One group of people who say that they want to cease fire now, despite the fact that Hamas has not been destroyed. One kind is they would like to see a situation arise where there could be a grand bargain in the Middle East, where, among other things, Saudi Arabia would recognize Israel. Israel would be able to have a rapprochement with the Palestinians in some way. And their main problem with that is there is no Palestinian state that could be used as a negotiating partner. So whatever the situation would be for this grand bargain, one of the proposals is to recognize a Palestinian state without any Palestinian state, just say we're going to recognize it. And that's actually on the table with some of our allies. There's no reasonable prospect for that because there is no government that would recognize a two-state solution from Palestine. The Palestinians themselves don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. They want Israel to go away. So if you recognize a Palestinian state that's unalterably opposed to the existence of Israel, that's stepping back, not forward. But there are people in the United States who think that might be a way to get beyond this. I think they're primarily looking at domestic political considerations. There are a lot of people in, let's say, Michigan and Minnesota who are Arab background and Muslim background, and they don't want to fight Hamas. They like Hamas. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of facts about what the Palestinians say they want and whether there's even any opportunity to negotiate with them, as long as what they want is the destruction of Israel. So bottom line is, if there was a ceasefire right now without Hamas being destroyed, Hamas would reconstitute itself as soon as they could, and they would come after Israel as a government and as a people. They would continue to do exactly what they've been doing, which is killing Jews.
And to underline that, there have been 7 wars since 2005, when Israel voluntarily withdrew from Gaza, when there were 10,000 Jewish settlers there, having a vibrant community, producing income on fairly decent relationships with the Gazans who were there. And a year later, through an uncanny democratic vote, Hamas seized power, threw out the Palestinian Fatahs, and essentially created this evil kingdom. I wanted to talk about 2 very interesting experts. One is American and one is British. The American guy is a retired U.S. Army major who came up through the ranks as what you and I would call a Mustang, and is an accomplished analyst of urban warfare at the Institute for Modern Warfare at West Point. The other is Richard E. Kemp, the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Why do they praise the conduct of the Israel Defense Force in the urban war with Hamas and Gaza?
Well, they praise it because they're impressed. And they both have watched the way the IDF fights up close in combat in not only in Gaza, but in other operations, for example, in Judea and Samaria against Hezbollah. They're they're both seasoned combat veterans and observers, and both of them have commented that the IDF is the most moral army in the world because of the way they fight. They're motivated by, again, spiritual background. They believe that God and wants them, and they believe this to their great credit, that every human life is precious, and that that's the most important thing that they can do as soldiers, is to protect human life, and not just human life, but also avoid unnecessary damage to infrastructure and to nature. So the code of the IDF is, it's in their code. The way they operate, the way they train, the way they teach their soldiers is spiritual, preserving human life. In war, there's no, you have to fight the war. War is about killing the enemy. But do it in a way that preserves as much human life as possible. Both Richard Kemp and John Spencer, again, both of them soldiers with great experience and scholars, very detailed observers of how to fight wars, have been up close and personal with the IDF, know their operations, know their way they conduct. And I think it was, you correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but it was John Spencer that said this is the way they fight. This is historic in the sense that never before has an army actually told the civilian population around, we're going to conduct operations. Please remove yourself from the battlefield because this is a dangerous place for you to be, giving the enemy warning ahead of time before they actually attack. It's never happened. That's unique in world history. And that's how the IDF is conducting their operations in Gaza. Have there been civilian deaths? Yes, we've seen it. We know that. The casualties of war are always regrettable. I hope we would agree that the United States military is also a military which conducts itself with the highest of ethics and intention to preserve, to avoid collateral damage, both life and property. We've had our own egregious mistakes that we regret in both Afghanistan and Iraq. So very recently, we have had limited success in avoiding collateral damage because oftentimes the enemy we're fighting wants collateral damage. They want to kill civilians because they are the human shields in front of them. So if Hamas wanted to, they could help with this by not using human shields, but they do it on purpose. They want civilians to die. That's the evil that Hamas represents.
Why is it difficult to supply humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza?
Well, first of all, it's a war zone. So trying to get any traffic into a war zone, whether it might have the most benign and beneficent purpose, is always going to be hard. The Israelis, for their part, are trying to facilitate the provision of aid to Gazan civilians. They want to help the people. Hamas is doing everything it can to frustrate that. Just as an example, when Israel told the Gazan civilians, leave northern Gaza and go south because we're going to conduct operations to rid that area of Hamas. Hamas specifically prevented the civilians from leaving the area. And they prevented humanitarian aid to come into the area because they don't want to have the people helped. They want the people to suffer. Hamas is doing this to their own people. Israel is trying to help. The goal is to kill Hamas, not to kill civilians. But it's also hard to get humanitarian aid in because some of the humanitarian aid is actually complicit with Hamas. The UN Relief Works Agency, which is for good reason, been shown to be complicit with Hamas because the people who work in the UN Relief Works Agency are often they're Hamas themselves. They're not trying to help the people. They're trying to help Hamas, and it's a really difficult business to do the two things. But the UN Relief Works Agency has been largely discredited over the past 3 or 4 months, and if the United States doesn't support it anymore, we don't provide any funds to it because of that. Some of our allies continue to do that. We had this terrible incident last week where 7 relief workers were killed by an Israeli strike. Terrible. Israel has apologized for it, and I believe their sincerity. I believe that they genuinely are regretful that this happened and will do everything they can to prevent it from happening again. But that's what happens when you're trying to operate a very difficult mission, providing humanitarian aid to a population held hostage by Hamas, who want the civilians to die, because that aids them in their propaganda. And with Israel doing their very best to try to get the equipment in there. Mistakes happen. They did. Terrible, regrettable. Israel is going to do everything it can to prevent it from happening again. But it just highlights the difficulty of getting humanitarian aid into a population held hostage by an organization like Hamas.
Finally, what should supporters of Israel consider doing in its hour of need?
I think there's a number of things that I have done, and I know you have, Terry. We have done, and I would recommend to any American that wants to, one, defend our country, help Israel to defend us all, but also alleviate suffering. There's things we can do. One, I think we need to have Israel's back, and I think all of us can do everything we can to spread the word. Talk to your friends. Use the opportunity when it's appropriate to defend what Israel is doing and tell the truth about what's happening. Two, I think we can contact our lawmakers, our congressmen and our senators, and we can let them know what we think. They listen. They may not always agree. We know some who are unlikely to agree, but tell them what we think. They want to hear, and that's what our role as citizens is to do, and including vote your conscience and vote for somebody that you think is going to do the right thing. In this case, I believe the right thing is supporting Israel. The third thing we can do is there are organizations, legitimately great organizations, which we can support, which provide real comfort to those who are suffering. And I would start with an organization called Friends of the IDF. FIDF. I send them contributions. I've been a member of Friends of the IDF for years now, and they're straight up. They're directly linked to the logistics command of the Israel Defense Forces, and they provide soldiers and their families with help that they need, especially during this time. And there are also other organizations that provide support to those who have been who are victims of the attack on October 7th, everything from providing help to people who've been dislocated. Israelis, as we know, there's probably 120 or 30,000 Israelis who've been dislocated from their homes along the southern and the northern border of Israel. They are not living there because they can't. It's too dangerous with the rockets coming in. So again, more than 100,000 Israelis had to leave their homes and living in hotels and temporary housing. There's ways we can get funds to them too. And I think organizations that do that are worth supporting. And the last thing I would say is pray. Prayer works. God listens to us. God wants to do good things for us, and he wants us to thank him, and he wants us to tell him how important his blessings are. Pray.
Pray, as we say in Psalm 122, for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yes.
And with that, General, we thank you for this thoroughgoing discussion. What it
Thank you.
is going on in Israel's war in Gaza, and also providing hope for an end to the conflict, but victory against evil in a civilizational war, and with the blessings of Hashem. Thank you.
May God bless us all. May God bless Israel.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. You there, John?
I'm here. I think it's still recording.